You have no right to hold on to Cedar Valley, Gregory roared, his hand slamming hard against the wooden table. The honor of this family is being destroyed because of you, Simon cut in coldly, his voice hissing through clenched teeth. Patrick sat in silence, head bowed, as if the slightest touch might shatter him. I sat there without a word, gently turning the brittle, yellowed pages of an old file. To them, I was just a widow, but what they didn't know was that in my hands lay the secrets Martin left behind, secrets that could either save me or bury us all. I am Eleanor Hayes, a mother, a widow, and from that very moment, I knew I had to prove that truth and love can stand firm against even the fiercest storms within a family. And if you're listening to me now, lean back or pour yourself a cup of coffee and get comfortable, because the story I'm about to tell you isn't just about disputes, betrayals, or the secrets I'm about to reveal. It's also about something more. How we found our sunrise again after the darkest of nights. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I'd be so happy to connect with you. I never thought there would come a day when I'd be sitting in a courtroom surrounded by cold wooden walls, the harsh light casting every feature into something harsher, more unforgiving. I sat at the plaintiff's table, back straight, hands clasped together. Every breath in the room seemed stifled, broken only by the clicking of the court clerk's pen. When the judge gave a nod, I rose to my feet. My voice rang out, not trembling as I had once feared, but clear and firm. Your Honor, under Article 14, Section 2, the 1995 contract was legally notarized. All rights to Cedar Valley were transferred to Martin Hayes, and upon his death, I, the lawful wife, am the sole heir. Hearing my own words felt almost surreal, as though I were listening to someone else. Not the retired literature teacher, not the woman who once stood before a chalkboard, but a woman who had grown to weary of polished rhetoric and now clung only to truth. What you're saying? Gregory shot to his feet, his chair scraping sharply across the floor. He slammed his fist on the table, hard enough to spill a glass of water. Is nothing but a twisted play on the law. You know Father left that land to the whole family. We share the same blood. We have the same right. His voice exploded, thick with the desperation of a man drowning in debt. I looked at his broad hand, knuckles raw and red from striking the wood. Greed had burned away his reason, leaving only fire. The judge struck the gavel in warning. Gregory refused to sit. His face flushed, veins standing out across his neck. My mind drifted back to old family meetings when Martin was alive. Gregory had always been the loudest, always craving control, and always the first to lose his temper. Gregory, I said in a low voice, keeping my calm, what you feel may be valid as emotion, but the law does not stand with emotion. It stands with documents, with evidence. He sneered, a laugh steeped in bitterness and spite. Simon placed a hand on his brother's shoulder, signaling him to sit. Then he stepped forward, the eldest, a celebrated lawyer, moving as if the courtroom were his stage. His suit was immaculate, his tie perfectly aligned, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Your Honor, Simon began smoothly, his voice low and composed. The Hayes family does not begin and end with Mrs. Eleanor. This family has endured for generations, building an honor that today, regrettably, is threatened by a narrow interpretation. I bit my lip. That wordy honor, he wielded it like a blade, gleaming yet dulled. I had lived long enough to know honor could not protect land, nor could it save a family being torn apart by ambition. We, Simon went on, casting me a look full of arrogance. Ask only for fairness. A reasonable share. No one here wishes to tarnish Martin's memory, but neither will we accept being cast aside. I sat back down, listening, not to agree, but to feel the layers of masks he wore. The polite tone, the calm eyes yet beneath them. I saw the raw fear of disgrace. Simon feared losing face more than he feared losing money. I thought of Martin. He once told me, Simon will choose appearances over truth. Gregory will choose money over kinship. And Patrick won't dare to choose at all. At the time, I brushed it off, unwilling to believe my husband could be so harsh. But sitting here today, his words were etched into the courtroom walls. The air was so tense I could hear my heart beat. I turned and saw Sarah, my daughter, seated in the back row. Her eyes were wide, seeing for the first time her mother, not avoiding, not yielding, but standing tall against a pack of wolves bearing the same name. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just protecting a piece of land. I was protecting a lesson that justice does not belong to the loudest voice, nor to the smoothest mask. It belongs to the truth. And then, as I gently closed my eyes, a memory pulled me back to the very first day I set foot in Cedar Valley. Patrick still sat hunched in the corner at the defense table. His voice was so faint it was almost lost to the room. His thin hands twisted together, knuckles pale white. I caught a flicker in his eyes, an impulse to escape, not to face. Patrick, do you have anything to add? The judge asked calmly. He cleared his throat softly, then dropped his head again. I think maybe we should find a way to reconcile. Bringing this into court like this, it won't benefit anyone. Gregory immediately whipped around, snapping, Shut up. You're always a coward. Reconcile what? We have to take the land back. If we don't, we'll have nothing left. Patrick flinched, like a schoolboy scolded in front of the class. He gave a faint nod, offering no resistance, but I saw something crack in his eyes. A life lived without ever daring to choose his own path, always stepping back, letting others decide for him. I sighed, quietly observing. They, Martin's brothers, each bore their own fracture. Gregory chose confrontation, Simon chose appearances, Patrick chose avoidance. And in that empty space, I understood. If I did not stand firm, no one else would. I heard the scrape of a chair behind me. Sarah half rose, then sat back down, as though unable to contain herself. My daughter stared at me, eyes wide with astonishment. She was used to seeing me gentle, yielding, always avoiding conflict. But now, here I sat calm, upright, answering each question as if my whole life had been leading to this moment. Her gaze swept across her uncles, the chaos, the anger, the arrogance, and then returned to me. I knew she was comparing, learning to see the difference. She said nothing, but in her eyes I caught it, the very first spark of belief. The judge announced a recess, his gavel striking, the sound making the whole room tremble faintly. The echo rang in my head like a bell. I sank back into my chair, breathing out slowly. Weariness seeped into my bones, but my heart did not waver. I closed my eyes. Instantly, the image returned: the tall wooden gates, sunlight filtering through the branches, and the long road leading into Cedar Valley on the day I first arrived. No one in that courtroom knew that it was that very memory, the flame, that kept me steady in my seat today. The memory carried me back to a somber afternoon. I sat in the old office of the family lawyer, the scent of polished wood mingling with the musty odor of aged papers. He slid a thick envelope across the desk toward me, sealed with a faded red wax stamp. At the same time, he placed a small brass key in front of me, Everything Martin Hayes left behind isn't here. His voice was hoarse, his eyes carefully avoiding mine. I reached out. Though my fingers trembled, my fingertip brushed the surface of the envelope cold as ice while my heart burned hot. I knew every word inside could alter the way I saw my husband. And yet, my eyes no longer wavered. They shone with a strange determination, like a light guiding me on my own path. I opened the letter. Martin's voice seemed to echo through the stillness of the room. Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer by your side. There is a truth I never had the courage to tell you. I read slowly, each word pressing heavily against my chest. I was once forced by my father to sign a series of shady transactions, contracts that stained the family records. At that time, I was young, weak-willed, and I obeyed. In the years that followed, I carried nothing but shame. I paused, blinking rapidly. So that was it, the silence of Martin. The long nights he sat alone at his desk. It wasn't only work. It was a burden he had never shared. The letter continued. I changed my name from Hastings to Hayes. A cowardly choice, perhaps, but I believed it was the only way to escape the shadow of my family. I didn't want that name weighing on you or on our daughter. I chose to run. A tear fell onto the page, smudging the blue ink. I swallowed hard, torn between grief and anger. Grief for the weight he had carried all his life. Anger because he hadn't trusted me enough to bear it with him. Martin had cast aside the name, but his brother Simon had done the opposite. Simon clung to the glory of the family name, clutching to empty honor like a metal long since dulled. I could see their contrast written in every line. Martin fled the darkness. Simon chained himself to it. I leaned back into the chair, clutching the little key in my palm. It was small but sharp, leaving an imprint on my skin. I knew this was more than a key to Cedar Valley. It was a challenge Martin had left behind. He wanted me to face the truth. He once bowed his head to avoid it in the stillness of the room. I heard the steady tick-tock of the grandfather clock. Each sound pressed against me, urging, do what he never dared to do. I folded the letter and slipped it into my handbag. My eyes burned, but a hot current in my chest kept me from sitting still. I rose to my feet, my hands still trembling, but my steps carrying a new resolve. That day, for the first time since Martin's death, I no longer felt like the woman left behind. I became the one entrusted with responsibility. I sat for a long time in that empty office, the letter on the desk like a wound still bleeding. On the page, Martin appeared as a different man, calculating, secretive, filled with truths I had never known. I loved him, the husband who carried burdens all his life to shield his family. But I also hated him to the point of choking back tears, because that same protection meant I had been shut out. I whispered to myself, Martin, you should have trusted me. We could have faced this together. And yet, even with tears clinging at the corners of my eyes, I saw him clearly in every word, the warm man who always wanted to map out a path for others. Even in death, he was still trying to draw me a future. That, too, was what made me both love him and resent him. The lawyer cleared his throat and said, if you wish, you could sell the land right now. The process would be quick. No more entanglements. A dry laugh escaped me. Sell it. Let everything sink into oblivion? Perhaps Patrick, the youngest, always afraid of conflict, would choose that path. He would nod, take his share, and walk away. But not me. I refused to follow the easy road. No, I replied firmly. I will go there myself. I caught the surprise in the lawyer's eyes, then a small nod, as though he finally understood. I was no longer the woman who only stood behind her husband. That night, I spread the letter on the table once more. Beside it, I placed the small key and an old map Martin had kept in his drawer. On the map was a winding road leading to a valley in Canada, Cedar Valley. I traced the faded blue lines with my fingers, as though touching Martin's very heartbeat. There was a part of him he still hid, but another part he had chosen to entrust to me. And that part I could not betray. Night deepened. In the room, only the clock's tick-tock remained. I sat up straight and drew a long breath. Tomorrow, I would set out. I folded the map and slipped it into my bag. Standing before the mirror, I looked straight into my own eyes. My breath was uneven, but my resolve was etched deep. I knew this journey would change everything, and I inhaled once more, as if to draw into my lungs all the strength I would need for the road ahead. The dirt road led me to an old wooden gate, its sides draped in thick vines. I stopped, overwhelmed by a feeling I couldn't quite name. Martin had always told me Cedar Valley was ruined, abandoned, a place nobody cared for. I had braced myself to see desolation, wild weeds, crumbling barns, roofs caving in. But when I pushed the gate open and stepped inside, the sight before me left me breathless. Stretching out before me was a vast valley, the golden afternoon sun spilling across rolling fields of lush green grass. A clear brook wound its way through rows of blazing red maples. The main stone house stood solid, its roof tiled with moss yet unyielding, its windows gleaming in the light. This was no wasteland. It was a living painting, a place waiting for a careful hand to bring it fully back to life. I walked slowly, unable to take my eyes off the details. Wonder surged in my chest, tangled with frustration. Martin had lied to me. He had not only hidden contracts and secrets, he had hidden this beauty. He once told me this place wasn't worth keeping, that it was nothing but a burden he had to carry. But clearly, that wasn't the truth. I laid my hand on the rough stone wall, caught between the sting of betrayal and the awe of being given such a gift. I didn't know whether to cry or to laugh. Inside the house, dust lay thick on the shelves and furniture. I opened drawers, tested doors. Then, in the study, I found a small monitor already connected to a hard drive. I sat down, trembling, and pressed the button. Martin's image appeared. He sat in his familiar armchair, dressed in a simple sweater. His gentle eyes and warm smile filled the room with light. "Eleanor," his deep, steady voice began, "if you are in Cedar Valley, it means you chose to walk this path. I know you're angry with me, and you have every right to be, but I want you to see this place with your own eyes." My hand flew to my mouth, my breath caught. His voice wasn't an excuse, nor an attempt to hide. It was the voice of a man who knew he had been wrong, yet still wished to leave behind a chance for the one he loved. "Cedar Valley is not just land," he went on. "It's a new beginning. For you, for Sarah, and for anyone with the courage to face the truth." I bowed my head as tears spilled freely. His kind face, his gentle smile, they stood in stark contrast to Gregory's cold, calculating eyes. Eyes I knew would one day glare across this same room. Gregory would see only numbers and profit. But me, I saw a legacy. I sat motionless for a long while. In the quiet, I could hear my heart beating not with anger, but with an unexpected, fragile hope. In the video, Martin leaned slightly toward the camera, his eyes carrying a resolve I had never seen in him while he was alive. "This is a new beginning," he said slowly, as if he wanted every word etched into my mind. "Not to run from the past, but to face it. Eleanor, you may think I've left you with a burden, but in truth, I wanted you and Sarah to have a place to rewrite the family story in a different way. I sat there, my hands clenched tightly together. His words reverberated in my head like a solemn hymn. Martin believed in new beginnings, while his brother Simon always feared change, clinging desperately to what he called family honor. The contrast was stark. One man dared to step out of the shadows. The other imprisoned himself within them. My eyes roamed the study. The large oak desk, coated with a thin layer of dust, still bore faint ink stains across its surface. I walked over and touched the rough wood. A strange sensation spread through me, as though I were placing my hand on Martin's very memories, while at the same time laying my hand on a future yet to unfold. In that moment, I no longer felt like a widow left behind with a troublesome inheritance. I felt a new strength, a hot current rushing through my veins, stronger than the shadow of the past, stronger than anything the Hayes brothers had ever believed of me. A new beginning. I whispered. My own voice sounded unfamiliar, not trembling, but steady, charged with resolve. I pulled out the chair and sat where Martin once had. Sunlight streamed through the window, falling across the desk in a long band, like a road opening before me. I drew a deep breath, trying to steady the pounding of my heart. Outside, the wind stirred through the maples, leaves rustling. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the sound wrap around me. A strange peace, so peaceful I almost forgot that beyond these walls, the Hayes brothers would never allow me to keep this land unchallenged. Then suddenly the roar of an engine erupted at the gate. I jolted, eyes snapping open. Tires crunched over gravel, slow at first, then heavier, until the sound stopped right at the entrance. I rushed to the window. A silver-gray pickup truck stood just outside the gate. Its doors opened, and 3 men climbed out. Heavy coats, caps pulled low, their steps firm and deliberate as if they were no strangers to this land. I froze for a moment, my hand still pressed to the windowsill. My heart hammered, caught between alarm and curiosity. Who were they? Locals? Former farm hands? Or men sent by the Hayes brothers? I inhaled sharply, my fingers tightening around the brass keys still tucked in my pocket. For the first time, I saw clearly. This journey would not only be an exploration of memory, it would be a true confrontation. The pounding of fists echoed at the door, sharp and insistent. I turned back toward the oak desk, Martin's image still smiling on the screen. My heart wavered, but my feet carried me forward, step by step, toward the door. Outside, 3 shadowed figures waited. The wooden door groaned as I opened it, and standing there were not 3 strangers but Gregory, Simon, and Patrick. They hadn't bothered to knock again. Gregory all but stormed inside, his heavy steps rattling the floor beneath him. At last, "We've found you," Gregory said, his voice thick with accusation. His eyes darted around the room like a predator catching the scent of prey. "Did you really think you could hide from us forever? This land doesn't belong to you alone." I stood firmly in the doorway, my words deliberate. "This is my home, and I've never hidden from anyone, Gregory. I came here to face the truth. Cut the pretense," he snapped, slamming his hand against the oak desk. "Cedar Valley is worth a fortune. You have no right to keep it all for yourself." Behind him, Simon entered in stark contrast, his suit pressed, tie dark and neat, every movement slow and deliberate as if he were stepping onto a courtroom stage. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that sent a chill down my spine. "Eleanor." Simon drew out my name, his tone silky but edged with thorns. "Don't put yourself on a pedestal. What you have is nothing more than a piece of paper and whispers from the past. But the Hayes family, its honor is not yours to decide alone. I met his gaze head on. Honor? What honor is there in a family willing to trample each other for land? For a split second, Simon's smile faltered, but just as quickly, he smoothed it back into place, adjusting his cuff as if I were nothing more than a foolish woman speaking nonsense. And Patrick, the youngest, stood further back, his shoulders slightly hunched. I waited for him to speak, to take a stand, whether against me or with me. But all he offered was a faint nod, his eyes fixed on the floor. Patrick was always like that, silent, evasive, as if saying nothing would somehow keep the storm from touching him. I turned to him. Do you have anything to say, Patrick? This is part of your life too. He startled, then shrugged. I think maybe you and the others should talk it out. I don't want to make things worse. A cold draft swept in through the half-open door, rustling the papers on the desk. In that moment, I saw the contrast clearly. Gregory fiery, reckless. Simon polished, cutting. Patrick withdrawn, avoiding. And me, I wasn't running, wasn't shouting, wasn't hiding. I was choosing to stand and face them. Listen, I said, my voice firm. I'm not denying you your place as his brothers, but I won't let anyone impose on me, and I won't let Cedar Valley become some bargaining chip. I came here for the truth, and I will protect it. Gregory let out a scornful laugh. You think you can stand against us on your own? Don't forget you're an outsider. You don't carry the Hayes blood like we do. I clenched the brass key in my pocket, my breath quickening, but my eyes never left his. Martin chose me, and Cedar Valley is not the swamp of ambition you're trying to turn it into. For a moment, the room fell silent. Outside, the rustle of leaves seemed to echo the rhythm of my heart. I knew this was only the prelude. Gregory stepped closer, the stench of cheap cologne and stale smoke seeping from his coat into my face. His eyes burned with resentment, his thick hands curling into fists, ready to strike. I told you. Gregory growled. You have no right to keep this land. Open the door. Now. I stood tall, both hands gripping the doorframe like a wall. My voice trembled slightly, but each word rang with steel. No. I will not yield. This doesn't belong to you. This is Martin's legacy, and I will defend it. The words slipped from my lips, fragile as glass. Yet they landed like a declaration. I felt my feet rooted deep in the wooden floor, unshakable. Gregory's face flushed scarlet with rage. He slammed his palm against the door, the sound booming through the room. I startled, but didn't step back. In that instant, I realized the tremor in my voice was no longer fear, but the tension before a storm. I was standing firmer than ever. Simon then cut in, his voice carrying that practiced civility he always wore. Eleanor, you don't understand. This isn't just about land. This is blood. You don't bear the Hayes name by blood, and that's why we must reclaim it. Patrick, who had been silent all this time, suddenly muttered, Blood. We share the same blood, but you. His voice trailed off, unfinished. Blood. The three of them nearly spoke in unison, as if the word itself was a sacred weapon, enough to push me out of the doorway. I clenched my fists, nails biting into my palms. In my mind, Martin's voice rang clear, as if it were only yesterday. I never believed blood mattered more than love. I chose you, Eleanor, not for blood, but for your heart. I lifted my head and looked straight at all three brothers. Blood may bind you, but love is what keeps a family whole. Martin knew that, and so do I. Gregory spat out a curse, shoved Simon's arm aside, and stormed out. Simon followed, his leather shoes striking sharply against the wooden floor, his face rigid with wounded pride. Patrick lingered last, his eyes evasive, as though searching for an escape of his own. The door closed, leaving the room in silence. I stood there, chest heaving, drained yet strangely lighter. They were gone, but I knew it would not be the last time. I pressed my forehead against the doorframe for a moment, breathing deeply to steady myself. Then I turned back toward the desk. Amid the dusty piles of papers lay a single folder, neatly placed. As though Martin had known this day would come, I opened it. On the very first page, in his familiar handwriting, were the words, "For the day they return." My heart tightened. Martin had prepared long ago. He knew his brothers would come back, and he knew I would be the one to face them. And now, I was here exactly in the place. At the moment he had foreseen, I sank into the chair, my hand resting on the page, and drew in a deep breath. Outside the window, the wind surged harder, carrying the sound of falling leaves like the echo of a battle still waiting ahead. I heard a soft knock at the door, so different from Gregory's pounding earlier. When I opened it, a tall, gaunt man stood before me, his faded coat hanging loose, shoes caked with soil, shoulders slightly stooped. His hollow face was carved with deep lines like marks of time itself. Most striking of all was a long scar running from his ear down toward his jawbone, a trace he could never hide. He gave a small nod, his voice rough and husky. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm Daniel Brooks. I managed this farm for Martin." I froze. The name wasn't unfamiliar. Martin had mentioned Daniel before, but always in passing, as if there was something he didn't want to dig into. Daniel stepped inside, his eyes flickering with unease. He stopped a few paces away, clutching a battered old cap in his hands. I could see his awkwardness, but also a sincerity Gregory and Simon had never possessed. "I need to be honest," he began, his voice heavy as lead. "There was a time Gregory came to me. He wanted me to help hide some documents. In exchange, I'd get a sum of money." At that moment, I was this close to saying yes. He paused, drawing a long breath before continuing. "But in the end, I refused. I couldn't betray Martin. After all, he trusted me for over 20 years. But since that day, I've lived with shame. I've been afraid that if anyone found out, they'd think I was greedy too, just like him." I stayed silent, watching him. In Daniel's clouded eyes I saw no evasions. Only a man who had once stood on the brink of betrayal but stopped himself before it was too late. The scar across his face was proof some wounds we carry for life, but they can also serve as a reminder never to repeat them. "Daniel," I said, my voice low but steady, "everyone loses their way at some point. What matters is that you turned back. That's something Gregory and Simon will never do. They're wrong and they'll die hiding the truth. You, at least, had the courage to speak it." He lowered his head, gripping the cap so tightly his fingers went white. "Thank you for saying that. I don't expect forgiveness, but at the very least, I want to help you. I owe Martin, and maybe I owe my own conscience." In the damp wooden room, I felt an unexpected calm settle over me. This thin, scarred man with all his flaws and regrets gave me more peace than anyone in the Hayes family ever had. Gregory had money but no trust. Simon had prestige but only an empty shell. Daniel had a heart that knew how to admit wrong, and that made him different. I looked at him for a long time, then nodded. "Then we'll protect Cedar Valley together, not just for me, but for Martin's memory." Daniel lifted his head, a small, steady glint in his eyes. One knew I had just found an ally. He hesitated for a moment, then spoke softly, almost in a whisper. "There's a place I've never shown anyone. Martin told me, if the day ever came that you arrived here, I was to take you down there. His voice was hoarse, caught deep in his throat. I saw his hands trembling as he twisted the cap in his palms. Why are you so afraid? I asked. He lifted his gaze briefly, then turned away. Because that place holds memories I've tried to bury. I once stood too close to betrayal. If we go down there, everything will resurface. I laid a gentle hand on his thin arm. If Martin trusted you, then I will too. Take me there, Daniel. We don't have time to keep avoiding the truth. He sighed, then nodded, slowly making his way down the hallway. I followed, my footsteps soft against the wooden floor. At the end, a door creaked open, revealing a staircase leading into the basement. Darkness clung to the walls, thick and suffocating, the air heavy with dampness and the tang of rust. Daniel held up a flashlight, its dim yellow beam sweeping across each step. His hand shook, the light wobbling, throwing our shadows into frantic shapes on the stone walls. At the bottom, I realized this was no ordinary cellar. Rows of steel shelves stood in order, files carefully boxed, some envelopes still sealed with wax. In the center, a long table sagged under piles of documents, beside an old iron safe. Martin kept everything here, Daniel murmured. He called it the light underground, because he believed one day the truth would need to be brought out of the dark. I stood frozen. The flashlight skimmed across each folder, messy scrawls labeling them. Geological reports, extraction contracts, financial evidence. Each page was a blade, cutting through the polished lies of the Hayes brothers in court. This was the truth they never wanted to see daylight. Daniel bent over the safe and spun a series of numbers. The click echoed through the silence, making my pulse quicken. From within, he pulled out a small metal box. He set it on the table, lifted the lid, and revealed a black USB drive. This, Daniel said, his voice trembling, was the thing Martin guarded most. He said it should only be opened when there's no other choice. But he swallowed hard. He also said it was locked with two passwords. One he left hidden in the files. The other, only Sarah or you could uncover. I held the USB in my palm, its coldness seeping into my skin. Martin had always calculated, always prepared right to the very end. He had left me not only a farm, but a trial, a maze of truth only the brave could walk through. I looked up at Daniel. He prepared for this day a long time ago. Daniel nodded, his weary eyes glinting faintly in the dark. And now, it's all in your hands. I stared at the USB in my hand, the flashlight glinting off its glossy black shell. On it, written in silver ink, were the words, "Only open when the heart is ready." I knew this was just the beginning, and those two passwords they might decide whether we held on to Cedar Valley or lost it forever. I sat at the oak desk, the lamplight spilling across the battered laptop Daniel had just carried up from the cellar. The USB was plugged in, its tiny red light blinking like a slow, steady heartbeat. After 2 layers of passwords, one a string of numbers Martin used for legal documents, the other a familiar phrase only I could guess, Sarah's light, the files began to unfold. Dense folders opened one after another. A geological map of Cedar Valley spread across the screen, every contour traced down to the layers of soil. I saw the official report issued by the Canadian government. Protected forestland, clean water, no record of disputes. Right next to it lay a private survey Martin had commissioned from an independent team. Together, the 2 sets of data formed a seamless picture, airtight, undeniable. Oh my God, I murmured, my fingers trembling over the touchpad. He planned it all. Daniel nodded softly beside me. Not just legal, but meticulous. Martin left no opening for anyone to twist the truth. This is the strongest evidence against Gregory and anyone else who tries to claim it. In the name of family, I swallowed hard, scrolling through more of Martin's notes. He had written clearly, Cedar Valley is to be preserved for its ecological value, but it also holds potential for sustainable agriculture and clean energy. No mass exploitation permitted. Martin, the man his brothers called a runner, had prepared everything down to the last figure. He knew how valuable Cedar Valley was, but he hadn't chosen Gregory's path, selling it off to an energy conglomerate for quick cash. Gregory was always impatient, willing to sign anything just to have money in his hands. Martin, on the other hand, had kept Cedar Valley as his final piece of shield, a legacy. I saw the contrast sharply. On one side, Gregory's hunger for money. On the other, Martin's steady caution. Another file appeared, a list of companies that had tried to buy Cedar Valley. Some were big names, even Silver Horizon, the energy giant I would eventually have to face. But Martin had never replied. He'd hidden every offer, telling no one, not even Patrick, who was always so eager for approval that he leaked whatever he could. He played the game alone. I whispered, and this final piece. He held it to the end. Daniel leaned closer, his eyes reflecting the glow of the screen. Maybe he knew, one day, only you would have the patience to see the true worth of this land. I leaned back in the chair, pride and heaviness swelling together inside me. Martin had prepared everything, but he'd hidden it all. And now, as I sat here opening each folder, I felt like both an heir and someone being tested. My fingers brushed the screen where the last line of a note appeared. If you're reading this, believe that I trusted you from the start. Even when I wasn't brave enough to say it. My chest tightened. Perhaps Martin had never escaped the weight of his past. Yet in his silence, I saw clearly. He had chosen love and truth as his final legacy. As I flipped through report after report, a video file appeared at the bottom of the screen. I froze, my hand slowly guiding the cursor. For a brief moment I hesitated, then clicked. The screen lit up. Martin appeared, seated in his familiar study, soft light falling across his hair, now streaked with gray. He wore a dark blue sweater, his eyes fixed on the lens as if he were looking straight at me. Eleanor, his warm, steady voice began, if you're watching this, then I suppose my time has run short. There is something I never told you, because I didn't want to burden you. But now I believe you need to know. I held my breath. His voice was rough, heavy with truth. I've lived with heart disease for years. The doctors said I needed surgery, but I refused. I wanted to spend what time I had left preparing for you and Sarah, instead of lying on an operating table with risks no one could predict. I hid it from you, and I know that choice may leave you angry with me for the rest of your life. I clutched my chest, pain twisting inside. So those nights he sat silently by the window. Those times he pressed a hand to his chest with a soft cough I thought was mere fatigue signs. I had missed, and he had chosen silence. But Eleanor, Martin went on, his voice so tender that tears burst from my eyes. Everything I did was out of love. Cedar Valley isn't a commodity, isn't a transaction. It is a gift I wanted to leave for you, not to weigh you down, but to give you a new beginning. I trust you'll know how to make this place into something better. His image blurred behind my tears, but his words etched themselves deep into my heart. He called Cedar Valley a gift of love, while the Hayes brothers saw it only as a deal, a stack of cash waiting to be carved up. The contrast was so sharp, it cut me open. I couldn't choose blood, Martin said, sorrow in his eyes. but I could choose love. And I chose you, Eleanor. Every time. Always. I broke down in sobs I could no longer restrain. In his gentleness, I found both comfort and the weight of having to remain steadfast. The video ended. The screen went dark, reflecting my own face, eyes red and swollen. Yet behind them something shone brighter, stronger. Suddenly, the phone rang, its sharp chime yanking me back to reality. I wiped my tears and answered. Mom. Sarah's cheerful voice bubbled on the other end, quick and eager like a child showing off a prize. I just spoke to the uncles. They said this time it'll be fair, that everything will be divided clearly, no one left out. I think maybe this will be easier than we thought. I froze, gripping the phone tightly. Martin's words still echoed in my heart. Cedar Valley is a gift of love. And my daughter. She couldn't yet see the truth behind the word fairness the brothers were hiding behind. I drew in a deep breath, steadying my voice to answer Sarah. But inside, a cold foreboding crept in. Those promises, they weren't fairness. They were only the opening gusts of a far greater storm. I heard the door fly open, then hurried footsteps pounding down the hall. Sarah burst in, her face flushed, her eyes shining not with tears, but with anger. Mom, why would you do that? She practically shouted the moment she saw me. I just talked to the uncles. You're keeping everything for yourself. You're not giving them a chance. You're being selfish. I stood, drawing a deep breath to steady myself. Sarah, listen to me. I'm not keeping anything for myself. I'm protecting what your father left. There are things your uncles didn't tell you. No, you always do this. She cut in, her voice breaking. You always act like you know everything, like you're always right. But you don't understand, this is my family, my blood. How can you stand against them? I went still for a beat. Those words felt like knives driven straight into my chest. Blood. The same word the Hayes brothers used to push me down, now repeated by my own daughter, Sarah. I said slowly, keeping my eyes on her face. I understand that you're angry, but fairness isn't in promises. It's in the truth. And the truth is, you don't get to decide the truth for me. She yelled, her voice trembling. I'm done living in your shadow. You control everything. You never trust that I'm grown enough to see for myself. I swallowed hard but kept my tone even. I don't want to control you. I just don't want you to be deceived. She let out a bitter laugh, tears brimming. They're not deceiving me. They just want what's right. They told me the family's honor is being destroyed by you. I froze. I knew that cadence at once soft, polished, designed to seep into the mind. Simon. It had to be Simon. He always knew how to plant doubt and watch it grow. Honor? I shook my head lightly. Sarah, honor won't feed you, won't protect you when people try to use you. Truth will. Your father believed that. I believe that. But I'm not sure anymore, she said, her voice pulled taut like a string about to snap. I don't know if you're telling the truth. All I see is you always being hard, always standing alone, shutting out everyone else's feelings. I stepped closer, wanting to rest a hand on her shoulder, but she drew back, her eyes blazing with turmoil. I need to verify it myself, she said, voice shaky but resolute. I can't just take your word for it. I have to find the truth on my own. In the small room, the wind outside the window howled in bursts. I looked at Sarah and saw in her a reflection of my own youth, passionate, impulsive, too quick to trust. But unlike me, she was being pulled between two forces, love and deceit. I sighed. If that's what you want, I won't stop you. But remember, The truth is never comfortable. It will hurt you. Sarah turned her face away, a tear sliding down her cheek. But she said nothing. The argument between us didn't end there. It flared like a fire, each word feeding the flames. You always think you're right, Sarah shouted, her fists clenched, shoulders trembling. You never listen. I'm grown now. You can't keep me in your cage of control anymore. I tried to keep my voice steady, though my heart felt torn to pieces. Sarah, I only want to protect you. Your father didn't leave this legacy for your uncles to fight over. Don't you see? They see only money, not you. Enough, she screamed, tears streaming down her face. I'm tired of you always playing the noble victim. Do you think you're any different from them? You're keeping everything for yourself, just like they are. I froze. I knew those words weren't entirely her own. I could hear Simon's voice echoing smooth, reasonable, but wielded only to divide. You're wrong, Sarah. I stepped forward, hand outstretched. I'm not keeping it for myself. I'm keeping it for you. For us. She recoiled, her eyes torn between fury and despair. Then suddenly, she spun around, grabbed her bag, and bolted for the door. Her footsteps thundered across the wooden floor, and then the door slammed shut, leaving behind an aching silence. I stood frozen, as if all the air had been drained from the room. Watching Sarah turn her back reminded me of another image: Patrick, Martin's youngest brother, who always walked away when the pressure grew heavy, never choosing sides, never facing the truth. And now, my own daughter, my flesh and blood, was retracing that same path. I sank into a chair, my hands covering my face. Tears welled, but I refused to collapse. Martin had once said, "One day, she'll have to choose for herself. You can't choose for her forever." I had to believe Sarah was strong enough to come back. As I wiped my tears, my eyes fell on the still glowing computer screen. Among the countless folders, one name stood out: Sarah. My heart clenched. I reached out, fingers trembling over the touchpad. Martin. What had he prepared for her? Why was there a folder bearing her name among all these cold legal files? A spark of hope flickered in me. Perhaps Martin had left behind the answer to this rift between mother and daughter. Perhaps he had foreseen this very day, the day Sarah would doubt, rebel, and walk away from me. I drew a shuddering breath, my hands shaking uncontrollably. My chest throbbed with each beat, as if my own heart feared the answer would shatter it. But I knew I could not hesitate any longer. I moved the cursor to the folder and double-clicked. The screen flared, its light spilling over my tear-streaked face, reflecting in my red eyes. In that instant, I felt as if Martin were there, whispering, "Open it, Eleanor. She needs to hear from me." I inhaled deeply, eyes locked on the glowing screen, its cold blue light washing over my damp skin. I knew whatever appeared next could either mend or destroy the bond between Sarah and me, but I was ready to face it. The screen glowed, and another video appeared. Martin sat in his study, the desk lamp casting light over half his face, leaving the other half in shadow. He smiled faintly, a smile so familiar it made my heart tighten. "Sarah," he began, his voice slow and deep, as if he wanted each word etched into her memory. "If you're watching this, then perhaps your mother has opened it at a difficult time. I wish I could say these things to you face to face. But if I can't, think of this as my way of sitting beside you one more time." He paused, took a deep breath, and his eyes grew distant. "You know, when I was a boy, my own father left me behind. I would sit for hours on the porch, waiting for him to come back. But he never did. From that day on, I swore, no matter what, I would never abandon my family. I never abandoned your mother. I never abandoned you. Even with my mistakes, I've always been here. Tears spilled onto my keyboard. His words weren't just for Sarah, they reached into me as well. Martin had lived his entire life fighting against the abandonment etched into his childhood. And in that fight, he had created secrets, burdens. Martin gave a small, wistful laugh, as if remembering something. Sarah, do you remember when you were little, and the power would go out? You'd scream and refuse to sleep in the dark. You'd clutch your teddy bear and run to your mother, eyes squeezed shut. I'd sit by your bed, shining a flashlight on the ceiling, drawing pretend stars with the beam. You'd ask, Daddy, what if the darkness comes? And all I could answer was, when you open your eyes, the light will still be there. He bowed his head, his hands tightening. Now you're grown. Your fear isn't the darkness out there anymore, it's the truth inside you. I wish I could tell you. The truth is like darkness, too. The more you run, the more it follows. But when you're brave enough to open your eyes, you'll see the light has always been there. A lump rose in my throat. Sarah, my daughter, was doing exactly what her father described. She wasn't running from night. She was running from the fragments of family truth too painful to accept. Martin lifted his gaze to the camera, his voice deepening, firm, but still full of love. I know I hid my heart condition from you. I was wrong, and I admit it. I didn't want you to see me weak. Didn't want you to panic thinking one day I'd leave. But your mother is different. She's braver than I ever was. She faces the truth even when it makes her heart ache. Learn from her. Look the truth in the eye, Sarah. Don't let fear decide your life. I covered my mouth, sobbing. He confessed his faults, while I had chosen from the start to confront them. That difference had now become Martin's message to our daughter, a lesson only he could deliver. On the screen, Martin tilted his head, his voice softening. You don't have to be perfect, Sarah. You only have to be brave. And when you're brave, your mother will always be there, holding your hand. I reached out and touched the screen, feeling as though I were touching his very hand. The image wavered, blurred by my tears, yet his voice still rang out, holding me upright. Martin paused for a moment, inhaling as if to gather strength for the final words. His eyes looked straight into the lens, glowing with a familiar gentleness mixed with a deep, aching sorrow. Sarah, he said, his voice trembling softly, I can leave you many things, documents, land, detailed reports, but all of that is only the surface. The only thing you truly need is your mother. She is your anchor. Unlike the others, she will never exploit you, never push you into empty promises. Trust your mother, as I have trusted her. At those words, I could no longer hold back. Tears streamed down, my hands pressed to my mouth to stifle the sobs. I wished Sarah were here, right beside me, to hear her father speak these words himself. But I knew it wasn't enough. In the small room, Sarah sat on the chair opposite, the screen's glow lighting her face. 2 trails of tears ran down, but her lips stayed pressed tight. She trembled, yet she hadn't completely let go. I could see the struggle in her eyes, the tug of war between the love she had for me and the belief in those promises of fairness her uncles had planted. Dad, if you really trusted Mom that much, then why did you hide your illness? Why didn't you tell the truth from the beginning? Sarah burst out, her voice cracking, not directed at me, but at the figure on the screen. Martin, on the video, stayed silent for a long time, then lowered his head. He had no answer but the admission of his own fault. And perhaps it was that very silence that hurt Sarah more. I reached out, wanting to take her hand. but she drew back. I can't just believe a video, she said, her voice hoarse. I need to see for myself. I don't want to be led by you. Or by Dad. My heart clenched. I understood this stubbornness. It wasn't like Patrick's cowardice the way he always avoided responsibility and let others choose for him. Sarah was different. She wanted to confront things, to see with her own eyes. But that difference was dangerous, because she could be drawn into the whirlpool of lies. I drew a deep breath, pressing all my fear down inside my chest. If that's what you need, I won't stop you. But Sarah, promise me one thing. Don't let anyone decide for you. Don't let them use your hunger for fairness to bind you. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, nodded slightly but didn't look at me. In her eyes shone a determination I found both familiar and strange. Sarah sprang to her feet, grabbing her bag. I'm going to find the truth, she said, her voice choked but resolute. The door closed behind her, leaving me alone, my trembling hands on the keyboard. In that moment, I understood my daughter had chosen the path of confrontation. So different from Patrick, who had always been led. But that path could be full of traps. Sarah left the house, the slam of the door still echoing inside me. I knew she would find her own way to face the truth, and she did exactly that. She went to Daniel first. That afternoon, the wind swept hard across the fields as Daniel stood on the barn porch, his hands tucked into the pockets of his faded coat. Sarah arrived, her shoes dusty from the road, her face still streaked with tears. Mr. Daniel, she began, her voice hesitant, I want to hear it from you. About my father, and about what my uncle said. Daniel froze. He looked down at the ground, then lifted his gaze, guilt clouding his eyes. Your father, Martin, was the only one who trusted me when no one else would. But Gregory, he once pressured me to alter the survey records, to make this land look worthless. He promised money more than I ever thought I'd see in my life. Sarah's eyes widened. And what did you do? Daniel shook his head, his shoulders sinking. I almost said yes. One step more and I would have betrayed your father. But in the end, I refused. I couldn't do it. Because I owed your father honesty. From that day on, Gregory never forgave me. He threatened me, mocked me as a coward. I've lived under that shame ever since. Sarah looked at him, her wide eyes pounding with her heartbeat. She saw in Daniel an awkward honesty, a shame he couldn't hide. So different from Simon, her uncle, with polished words and lies hidden in every smooth sentence. You don't have to lie to save face, Sarah thought. And that alone makes me trust you more than anyone else. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She searched through her father's old phone contacts, and finally, she found a name. Professor Richard Coleman, the legal advisor Martin once consulted. When signing crucial contracts, her heart pounded as she dialed. On the other end came the voice of an old man, aged but still steady. Hello, this is Sarah Hayes, Martin Hayes's daughter. I'm sorry to disturb you, but I need to ask. Was my father of sound mind when he signed the Cedar Valley land contracts? There was a long silence. Sarah held her breath. Then the professor's voice came, firm and clear. Your father was completely lucid. I remember it well, because I asked him, Martin, are you sure about this? And he answered, I know what I'm doing. I'm doing it for my family. He was never confused or deceived. He chose, and he signed, with full clarity. Sarah bit her lip as tears welled again. The lies her uncles had told, that Martin had been sick, that he wasn't in his right mind, that the documents were invalid, all of it shattered in an instant. Thank you, Professor, she whispered, her voice choked. Thank you for telling me the truth. In the darkness of the night, Sarah sat alone, clutching the phone in her hand. She cried, but these were different tears of finding a real piece of the puzzle. She wasn't ready to run back to me yet, but inside her, trust had begun to flicker once more. After the call with Professor Coleman, Sarah tossed and turned all night. Her eyes burned, her head spun with endless questions. Then, while searching through her father's old computer, she accidentally opened a folder of archived emails. Among the hundreds of messages, one name caught her eye. To R. Coleman. Subject: Cedar Valley. Sarah clicked it open. Richard, I have thought it through carefully. I signed the contract with full clarity, and I want you to keep a copy in case anyone doubts it. I did not do it for profit, but for Eleanor and Sarah. One day, I hope they will understand. Sarah sat frozen, her trembling hand resting on the screen. Her father's email matched word for word what the professor had just said, and the video Martin had left. There was no doubt left. The truth stood clear, in absolute contrast to the lies her uncles had tried to force into her mind. She broke down crying, but this time, not from anger or doubt. It was the cry of a daughter who had finally reached her father's hand, even though he was gone. The next morning, Sarah returned to the wooden house where I sat waiting. When the door opened, I caught sight of her trembling shoulders, her face drawn from lack of sleep. Sarah, I called softly. She stepped inside, her eyes swollen red, then suddenly fell to her knees before me. Mom, I'm sorry. Startled, I hurried to lift her up. No, you don't need to do that. Just coming back is enough. Sarah sobbed, her voice broken. I believed my uncle's words. I blamed you, thought you were selfish. But I checked for myself. Dad was clear-minded. He did everything for us. And you were never wrong. I held her tightly, my heart bursting open. Warmth spread through me. This wasn't just an apology. This was Sarah's first step into maturity, so unlike Simon, who still chose hollow honor over truth. I stroked her hair and whispered, "You don't need to apologize. What matters is that you dared to find the answer yourself. Your father would be so proud." Sarah buried her head into my shoulder, and for the first time in years, we cried together in each other's arms. But the peace didn't last. That afternoon, the sound of a car engine rumbled at the gate. Sarah and I looked out the window. A sleek black sedan pulled up to the porch. From the car, Gregory stepped out, his face twisted with bitterness. Simon adjusted his tie, and Patrick trailed behind. But this time, they weren't alone. A man in a gray suit, leather briefcase in hand, metal-rimmed glasses gleaming, stepped out with them. His face cold, his thin smile sharp, the unmistakable look of a lawyer hired to fight to the end. I rose to my feet, gripping Sarah's hand tightly. Through the glass window, I saw the three Hayes brothers and their lawyer advancing. The real battle had just begun. They sat across from me in the living room. The long wooden table between us felt like a battle line. Gregory leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes darting restlessly but his tone dripping with arrogance. "All right, Eleanor," he said, a half-smile curling on his lips. "We don't need to drag this to court. No need to make a spectacle of ourselves. Just split it 3 ways. Everyone gets a share, clear and fair. You keep yours, we take ours. Everyone's happy." Sarah sat beside me, her lips pressed tightly together. I saw her hands trembling, but she stayed silent, waiting for my response. I exhaled slowly, then pulled a thick folder from my coat pocket and set it on the table. The heavy thud echoed sharply through the hushed room. Fair? I raised an eyebrow, my voice low. Gregory, fairness isn't measured by the mouth of a greedy man. It's measured by evidence. I opened the folder, spreading out the survey reports Martin and his team of experts had compiled. Detailed geological maps, verified figures, notarized documents. I pushed the stack across the table, my gaze sharp as a blade. This, I said, is the truth. Cedar Valley is not some commodity to be divided three ways. It is legally protected, lawfully managed, and Martin left full authority to me. If you dare to use the word fairness, look closely at the numbers before you open your mouth. Gregory slammed his hand on the table, his face flushed crimson. You think a few papers can scare us? I've got a lawyer sitting right here. The lawyer nodded, opening his briefcase. But before he could speak, Simon leaned forward, his eyes blazing. The polished mask of civility cracked, his voice hard with fury. Eleanor, do you really want to drag the family's name through the mud like this? For decades, the Hayes name has stood with the law, with prestige. If you take this to court, you won't just pull us down, you'll pull yourself down too. Do you really want the world laughing at you? I met his gaze, unflinching. Simon, you're mistaken. I couldn't care less what people think of the Hayes name. What I care about is justice. Honor won't save anyone. Honor won't protect the truth. But justice will. Simon's face went pale, then purple with rage. His fists clenched, as though I had crushed his so-called honor right there on the table. Meanwhile, I sat tall, my tone calm, almost icy, and Sarah glanced at me, her eyes wide with astonishment. She had never seen her mother stare down threats of family honor without a trace of fear. Gregory let out a hollow laugh, trying to mask his unease. You're too confident, Eleanor. But you've forgotten one thing in this world. The law doesn't always win. Money and connections do. I shot back, each word nailed down like iron. Then you'll see. This time money and connections won't save you. The room still reeked of the cigar Gregory had just stubbed out in the ashtray. The air grew heavy, as though every word was ready to ignite into sparks. Then, from the corner of the table, Patrick cleared his throat softly, his shaky voice rising. Maybe we shouldn't push this so far. Patrick lifted his eyes to each of us, then quickly averted his gaze from Gregory. Isn't there some way to reconcile? Everyone, take a share, but keep the family bond? Gregory snapped his head around, slamming his hand on the table again. Shut up, Patrick. You're always a coward. Reconciliation means losing everything. Don't you get it? Patrick shrank back, his hands gripping the hem of his coat, offering no defense. His hesitation only sharpened the contrast in the room, Gregory pushing the conflict to the edge, Patrick retreating from it, while I neither advanced nor backed away, but sat tall, facing them head-on. Simon cut in, his voice dripping with disdain. Reconciliation is naive, Patrick. This isn't family business anymore. This is a battlefield. I looked at Patrick, my gaze softening. In him, I saw a shadow of Sarah the day she walked away, those wavering, uncertain eyes. But unlike my daughter, Patrick wasn't searching for truth. He only wanted to avoid it. The door swung open. The sharp click of high heels struck the wooden floor. A woman of Asian descent entered, dressed in a charcoal blazer, hair neatly pinned, carrying a thick folder. Her cold eyes swept across the room before settling on me. I'm Amaya Chen. Representing Silver Horizon, she introduced herself crisply, each word precise. I'm here to confirm. Our company will only sign a contract if transparency and sustainability are guaranteed. Gregory shot to his feet, as if salvation had just walked in. Ms. Chen, I can guarantee enormous profit if you partner with me. I know how to exploit this land to its fullest, without wasting time on meaningless conditions. Amaya turned, her gaze cutting sharp. Then I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes. Silver Horizon does not do business with those who disregard the environment. This land is not for stripping bare, it is for sustainable development. You may find another partner. Her words landed like a slap across Gregory's face. He froze, then forced a weak smile. But his eyes blazed, fury boiling to the surface. Amaya shifted her attention to me. Mrs. Hayes, I've reviewed part of the documents. If what you claim holds true, we're willing to negotiate. But it must be under absolute transparency. No compromises. I nodded, my voice steady. That is my principle as well. The contrast was stark. Amaya, cold but fair, standing firm on principle. The Hayes brothers, swaying between greed, hollow honor, and fear. The tension in the room was tight as a drawn bowstring. Then Daniel entered from the back door, carrying an old envelope sealed with yellowed wax. He placed it in my hands and whispered, Mrs. Hayes, Martin left this for you. He said, open only in an emergency. I clutched the envelope, the rough paper scraping against my skin. My heart pounded fast. Emergency. Martin had foreseen this moment. But was I ready to open it now? I sat alone in the study, the yellow lamplight falling across the old envelope Daniel had just handed me. The red wax seal was faded, the paper edges frayed. I drew a deep breath, my fingers trembling as they traced the brittle seal, then slowly opened it. Inside were several pages, written in Martin's familiar hand, the blue ink already fading with age. I read, each word cutting into me like a blade. Eleanor, if you are opening this letter, it means the path we've walked has reached a dangerous turn. I must finally speak the truth I have hidden my entire life. My father, before he married my mother, he had another family, and from that family, there were 2 sons, carrying his blood. I've known for a long time, but I chose to remain silent, not out of cowardice, but because I wanted my brothers to face it themselves, to choose their own path. I never wanted to turn a secret into a weapon. I stopped, clutching the page tight. My heart pounded, my mind spinning. So the Hayes brothers had lived all along in a fractured family, where kinship was divided from the very root. Simon had spent his life clinging to family honor, but this truth alone was enough to shatter that illusion. Martin had written on, I believe the day will come when they must face the truth. Truth does not need anyone to guard it or protect it, it will speak for itself. You only need patience. Remember, Eleanor, the truth is stronger than any mask. I exhaled, torn between pity and anger. Martin had chosen silence, letting truth surface in its own time, while Simon had built his life on concealment. 2 men, 2 choices, 2 extremes. And now I was the one left to stand in the middle, watching it all unravel. At the end of the letter, a short line made my heart tighten. You may meet Robert, my eldest brother. If you are reading this, he may have already come to you. Robert does not have much time left. He is in end-stage kidney failure, clinging to a sliver of hope. If you can help, please help him, not out of blood ties, but out of compassion. I laid the paper down and covered my face with my hands. A stranger, Martin's half-brother, was living his last days. He wasn't here for land or profit. He came for survival. And I had been entrusted by Martin with the choice. Emotions crashed over me. Anger at Martin for keeping this secret. Sorrow for his decision to choose love over blood. And pity for Robert, a man never acknowledged. Now left with nothing but desperation, I looked out the window. The night sky was scattered with stars, but their light could not pierce the heaviness pressing on my chest. I whispered, as if Martin were beside me, "You've left me with such a cruel riddle, Martin." But I won't turn away. I never have. I sat in silence for a long time, the letter trembling in my hands. Martin's words still echoed. "If you can help Robert, please help him, not for blood, but for compassion." The next day, I arranged to meet Robert at a small cafe in town. As soon as I walked in, I recognized him, a gaunt man, face pale, eye sockets sunken deep. He leaned on a cane, each step heavy, as if carrying the weight of years of illness. "Mrs. Hayes." His voice was hoarse, his eyes glimmering with desperation. I nodded, invited him to sit. After a few minutes of silence, Robert gathered all his courage, his trembling hands clutching the coffee cup. I don't have much time left. The doctors said if I don't get a kidney transplant, I won't survive more than a few months. I know I have no right, but could you help me reach out to Sarah? She's young. She might be my only hope." I drew a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. "Robert, I will reach out. I will talk to her. But remember, it is her freedom to choose. I will not force her. I will not turn love into a burden." Robert froze, then his eyes darkened. He shook his head, his voice breaking. "You say that so easily, but you don't understand what it feels like. Time killing you slowly every day. I don't have the luxury of waiting. I need this, Eleanor. I beg you, pressure her if you must. I can't wait for the freedom you speak of." I looked at him, my heart heavy. While I held the composure of someone who believed in choice, he was being consumed by despair. To stark opposites. "Robert," I said slowly, "I feel for you, but I will not repeat the mistakes of your father and mine men, who forced others to live by their will. I will let Sarah decide, because if she chooses, it must be out of compassion, not pressure." He lowered his head, both hands trembling violently. In his eyes, I saw the depth of his fear. Fear of death. Fear of being forgotten. Fear that his life would end in utter loneliness. Meanwhile, at the Cedar Valley cabin, the three Hayes brothers were tearing apart the facade of unity they had built. Gregory hurled the stack of documents onto the table, shouting, "Simon, it's all your fault. You keep preaching about honor, but what have you done besides hiding the truth?" Simon snarled, his face flushed red. "If it weren't for your gambling and debts piling up, we wouldn't be in this mess. You're the real burden." Patrick sat in the corner, trembling, until finally he burst out, "You think I don't know? I was the one who tipped off the competitors so they would raise the price. I did it because I was afraid both of you would drive this family into ruin. But you're nothing more than wolves tearing at the same carcass." The air exploded like a bomb. Accusations, shouts, all echoing through the cabin. When I returned to Cedar Valley, I heard the shouting even before I reached the door. The three Hayes brothers, those who had once claimed the sacred bond of blood, were now tearing each other apart. I gripped Martin's letter tightly in my hand. He had been right. The truth would reveal itself in the end, without anyone needing to defend it. When I stepped into the living room, the scene before me looked more like a battlefield than a family meeting. Papers scattered everywhere, shattered cups on the floor. Gregory, his face blazing red, jabbed a finger straight at Simon's chest. "This is all your fault," he roared, his voice hoarse. "You're always preaching about family honor, about keeping up appearances. But in the end, all you've done is hide the truth and drag us down into the mud." Simon shot to his feet, his tie hanging askew, his face purple with rage. You dare blame me? If it weren't for your gambling, your debts piling up everywhere, we wouldn't be in this mess. People don't laugh at us because of me. They laugh because of a greedy, useless eldest brother like you. I stood at the doorway, silent, letting them expose their true faces to each other. Patrick, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, finally erupted. His voice trembled, but it carried raw desperation. You think I'm some saint. I was the one who told the competitors about Cedar Valley. I gave them information so they could inflate the price. I thought if I did that, they would value me. I was wrong, but I did it because I was so afraid. Afraid both of you would drag this family into ruin. Gregory and Simon spun around at the same time. What? They shouted in unison, their eyes wide. Patrick shrank back, clutching his head with both hands, his voice cracking. I didn't want to, but I didn't know what else to do. I've never been strong enough to stand against you. I just wanted to be acknowledged, just once. In that moment, Patrick's weakness was laid bare. He was no longer the shadow lurking behind his brothers. He had confessed, tearing off his own mask. But instead of uniting them, his admission only poured fuel onto the fire. Traitor! Gregory bellowed, lunging to grab Patrick by the collar and yanking hard, toppling the chair beneath him. Simon stood frozen, lips pressed tight, his eyes glinting with both disdain and relief as if secretly glad. There was finally someone else to blame. I watched the scene, my heart heavy. 3 brothers, who for years invoked the sanctity of blood, now tearing each other apart like beasts cornered in the dark. Then I glanced at Sarah, standing by the staircase. She didn't scream, didn't flee like before. Her eyes were bright, her face tense but resolute. She was seeing with her own eyes the rotting core of the so-called family honor her uncles had always preached. In the chaos of those 3 men, I saw something strange. Patrick's weakness, Gregory's violence, Simon's arrogance, all of it only highlighted the growing strength within Sarah. She no longer trembled, no longer doubted. She looked straight at the truth, her lips pressed together, as if silently vowing, I will not follow their broken path. The shouts echoed through the room. Gregory gripped Patrick's collar tightly, growling as if he meant to crush the frail brother trembling beneath his hands. Simon slammed the table, shouting over them, Enough! You 2 are turning this family into a circus. But even he couldn't hide the tremor in his voice. His hand clutched the table's edge so tightly the knuckles turned white. Patrick choked out, struggling to push Gregory away. You've always treated me like a burden. But it's you who dragged this family into the abyss. I only did what I thought might save myself. Save yourself by betraying us? Gregory roared, his face crimson, veins bulging at his temples. You don't deserve the Hayes name. Simon gave a bitter laugh, his voice sharp with disdain. And what's left of the Hayes name anyway? A debtor, a traitor, and a man clinging to hollow honor. We're nothing but 3 puppets pulling each other's strings. The air grew thick, like gunpowder ready to ignite. The 3 brothers stood there, eyes blazing, every word another blade slicing apart the blood bond they'd once boasted of. In that moment, I understood. The Hayes family, at least in its old form, had collapsed. I turned to Sarah. She was no longer crying, no longer trembling. She stood tall beside me, her hand gripping mine so tightly I could feel the thrum of her heartbeat. I laid my other hand gently over hers, an unspoken warmth binding us in the chaos. I stayed silent, only watching. I didn't need to speak. Justice was already at work, not through a judge's gavel or the weight of legal files, but through truth laid bare. Greed, arrogance, cowardice, all revealed in their own words and actions. I thought of Martin. He had once said, "You don't need to prove anything to them. The truth will prove itself." And now, I saw he was right. Gregory released Patrick, panting, then whipped around to face me. His face was twisted with rage and defeat. "Fine, Eleanor," he hissed, his voice like grinding steel. "You want justice? Then let the courts decide. I'll sue you. I'll drag everything into the light and prove you're not worthy of Cedar Valley." The room fell silent. Simon swallowed hard. Patrick slumped in his chair. Sarah clutched my hand tighter, her eyes fixed on Gregory, no longer afraid. I rose to my feet, my gaze calm but cold, meeting Gregory's fury head-on. Inside me, only one thought rang clear. Then let justice speak. The legal battle, the true war, had officially begun. Months dragged on in tension. Endless hearings, back and forth trips to law offices, documents reviewed again and again. Cedar Valley hung suspended in the air, belonging to no one yet, unresolved. But at last, the day of the trial arrived. I walked into the courtroom. A vast space with high ceilings and cold white light. Wooden benches lined in rows, the judge's bench looming above. Sarah walked close beside me, her hand resting on my arm, no longer trembling as in those early days. She had changed. Across from me sat the three Hayes brothers. Gregory, hunched forward as always, fists clenched, eyes blazing. Simon straightened his tie, back stiff, gaze proud but tinged with fatigue. And Patrick curled into himself in the corner, hands twisting, eyes averted. Three men, three different faces of defeat. When the judge's gavel struck, the air pressed heavy on everyone. Gregory was the first to lose patience. He shot to his feet, shouting, "Cedar Valley belongs to the Hayes family. She, Eleanor, is nothing but an outsider. A woman with no blood ties has no right to claim this land. We have the right, we have the honor, and we won't let her steal it from us." The gavel banged sharply. "Order in the court." The judge barked, but Gregory only panted, his eyes spitting fire. Then Simon rose, his voice smooth and cold. He quoted statutes, cited inheritance clauses, invoked family tradition, speaking as if lecturing a class. But the more he spoke, the clearer his emptiness became. He had no evidence, only pride and an obsession with honor. Patrick remained silent. He sat with his head bowed, never once looking up. The truth he had confessed earlier chained him into silence. His weakness showed starkly, a complete contrast to me walking to the stand calmly. Heavy folder in hand, my lawyer laid out the evidence piece by piece. Medical records proving Martin was of sound mind when signing. Certified documents confirming the legality of every transaction. And finally, the data from the USB, a trove of evidence Martin had left behind, detailed, meticulous, airtight. I glanced at the brothers. Gregory fidgeted, sweat beading on his forehead. Simon's face flushed purple, fingers drumming on the table in desperation to cling to his crumbling pride. Patrick sat still, his shoulders sagging, a shadow with no place in this war. The courtroom fell silent as my lawyer read the final note from the USB aloud. I, Martin Hayes, leave Cedar Valley to Eleanor Hayes, the wife who stood by me all my life. This is a gift of love, not a commodity to be divided. Those words rang through the chamber, thunder cracking in the hearts of the three brothers. I saw the falter in their eyes. The room tightened like a bowstring. Every gaze turned toward the judge as he lifted the thick file, turned a few pages, then raised his eyes to both sides. After reviewing the documents, the evidence, and the testimony of witnesses, the judge's voice rang steady, slow but firm. This court recognizes the legal ownership of Cedar Valley belongs to Mrs. Eleanor Hayes. Based on the will and the irrefutable evidence left by Mr. Martin Hayes, I closed my eyes. A wave of relief washed over me, like a burden buried for years finally lifted. When I opened them again, I caught Sarah's gaze, her eyes glistening, her hand gripping the edge of the bench tight. Across the room, Gregory shot to his feet. "No, this is impossible. This is a setup. We'll appeal. We'll—" The gavel struck 3 times, cutting through his screams. "Sit down, Mr. Hayes. The court has reached its final decision." Gregory kept shouting, but his voice cracked more desperation than rage. Simon sat frozen, pale, his lips pressed so hard they bled. For years he clung to the honor of the family, yet with a few words from the bench, that forbade collapsed completely. Patrick bowed his head, his shoulders trembling, too afraid to lift his eyes. The contrast was stark. I calm, resolute, had claimed Cedar Valley not through blood, but through justice. And they, the 3 brothers, lost everything because they clung to greed, pride, and cowardice. The judge wasn't finished. He handed another file to the clerk and declared, "Furthermore, the financial records of Mr. Gregory Hayes, Mr. Simon Hayes, and Mr. Patrick Hayes are hereby referred to an independent investigative body to examine suspicious transactions related to Cedar Valley and other assets. This court is adjourned." The final strike of the gavel echoed through the chamber. Gregory slumped back into his chair, face drained of color. Simon lowered his head, clutching his folder with nothing left to argue. Patrick sagged into himself, a gray shadow disappearing inside his own family. I turned to Sarah. She leapt to her feet, tears streaming, and rushed into my arms. I held her tight, feeling her trembling breath against my shoulder. "Mom, we won," she whispered, her voice breaking. I smiled through tears. "No, sweetheart, we didn't just win a piece of land. We won because we held onto the truth. And that's worth more than anything." In that cold courtroom, mother and daughter held each other, ignoring the curious stares and murmurs around us. In that moment, I knew this victory wasn't about Cedar Valley. It was about finding our trust in each other again, a triumph far greater than property. The court was over, but the story of Cedar Valley was not. When I returned to the estate, I knew I stood at a new crossroads, not just to protect this land, but to give it a future. In the small town meeting room, I sat across from Amaya Chen, the representative of Silver Horizon. She entered with a decisive air, her gray suit perfectly pressed, her gaze sharp but not hostile. The way she placed her briefcase on the table, neat, firm, reminded me immediately of Martin's caution. I opened the folder I had prepared for weeks. "I agreed to cooperate," I said, calmly, "but only on one condition. Cedar Valley must be developed under the principle of sustainability. No overexploitation, no pollution of the water source. And every profit must be made public with complete transparency. If Silver Horizon wants to step onto this land, the company must accept the strictest rules." Silence lingered for a few seconds. Amaya sat upright, flipped through the documents quickly, her eyes scanning each line. Then she gave a small nod. "Double quotes, Mrs. Hayes," she said, her tone firm. "These are not easy conditions for a company like ours. But for that very reason, I respect you. Silver Horizon agrees. We will sign." A faint smile touched my lips. Not a smile of victory, but one of solace. Cedar Valley would finally be protected, not turned into a money-printing machine for the greedy, as Gregory once dreamed. When the signing took place, I did not forget the second step, to allocate part of the profits to establish a scholarship fund for poor students in Cedar Valley and the surrounding areas. This fund, I declared, is not only to honor Martin, but to remind everyone that true value does not lie in pockets of money, but in the next generation. We sow knowledge, not debt. Sarah sat in the back row, quietly smiling, her eyes glowing with pride. She understood this was in stark contrast to the lives her uncles had led, men who squandered recklessly, chasing fleeting glitz. Amaya shook my hand, her grip cold but firm. Mrs. Hayes, she said, I've met many partners in my life, but few who hold to their principles until the very end. I believe this contract will not only bring profit, but true sustainability. I nodded. Yes, this is not my legacy alone. This is a reborn legacy, a new beginning for this entire land. In that moment, I felt as if Martin were sitting somewhere in the room, quietly smiling. He was no longer the man who hid his illness in the dark, but the one who had left me the chance to turn loss into hope. In the days after the contract with Silver Horizon was signed, Cedar Valley seemed to put on a new garment. No more pent-up tension. No more cars crowding the gate to fight over it. This place began to truly revive. And Sarah, my daughter, also began her own journey of growing up. I let Sarah try managing a portion of the scholarship fund's finances. She eagerly spent whole days at the desk, typing on the computer while jotting notes by hand. One afternoon, she came to me, her eyes hesitant. Mom, I think I made a mistake. I transferred a sum into the temporary account instead of the main one. I'm scared. I placed my hand on her shoulder, smiling reassuringly. Mistakes aren't what you should fear, Sarah. What's scary is not daring to fix them. Go back, check, call the bank, and make the adjustment. Don't be too hard on yourself. She took a deep breath, nodded. An hour later, she returned, her eyes glowing with pride. I fixed it. The bank confirmed everything. It's all settled. I looked at her, my heart swelling with pride. So different from her uncles Gregory, Simon, Patrick, men who only knew how to blame, evade, and pin faults on each other whenever their mistakes came to light. Sarah dared to face hers, dared to correct them. That is what true growth looks like. As for me, after months entangled in legal battles, I found comfort in an old solace: painting. In the attic, I retrieved the unfinished canvases, the familiar scent of oil paint softening my heart. One morning, the post office delivered a package from New York. The sender was Professor Margaret Cole, the woman who had once taught me painting in my youth. Inside was a painting I had left unfinished, which she had kept for decades. My hands trembled as I touched the dried paint, smiling wistfully. The painting wasn't beautiful, the strokes were clumsy, but it bore the mark of my youth, a time when I believed art could heal the world. Now, sitting before the canvas, I picked up the brush again. For the first time in years, colors danced across the white surface, light yet steady. I wasn't painting to forget, but to remember that my true self was still here. Unlike Simon, who clung his whole life to family honor like an empty painting, a coat of paint hiding cracks, I chose to return to art, the kind of honor that truly nourishes the soul. Sarah walked into the room, her eyes widening with surprise and emotion as she looked at the canvas I'd placed on the easel. Mom, I've never seen you look so radiant. I smiled, brush still in hand. Because I'm painting for myself and for you. Late afternoon, I returned to my desk, intending to sort through the documents. On the computer screen, a new file stood out in the USB folder. Final message, MP4. My heart skipped. I had never opened it before. My finger froze above the video icon, heart pounding. The glow of the screen reflected against my face, streaks of paint still smeared on my sleeve. I knew Martin was on the other side of that screen with his final message, and I was ready to listen. I took a deep breath, then pressed play. The screen lit up, and there he was, Martin. He sat in the old art room, with canvases carefully hung on the wall behind him. The afternoon light streamed through the window, catching the silver in his hair and deepening the look in his eyes. "Eleanor," he began, his voice warm, a little hoarse but so achingly familiar it made my heart clench. "If you're watching this, it means I no longer had the chance to say this to you in person. And perhaps you're sitting at Cedar Valley now, the place I guarded in silence for so many years." He paused, eyes dropping, his hands laced together on his lap. "I made mistakes, Eleanor, the greatest of my life. I hid too many secrets from you, my illness, my family's past, and decisions I made alone without giving you the right to choose with me. I thought I was protecting you, but the truth is, I took away your chance to walk beside me." His voice caught. Then he lifted his head, looking straight into the lens. "I'm sorry. I truly am sorry." I reached out, fingertips trembling as if to touch his face through the screen. Tears welled, blurring his image. Martin drew in a deep breath, then smiled faintly, warily. "But Eleanor, there's one thing I never once doubted. Our love. And I want you to remember. Family is not measured by blood. Family is made of the people we choose to love, to stand with, to forgive. Blood can betray, honor can fade, but love, it is the only thing that endures." His words echoed through the room, seeping into my very bones. I knew this message wasn't only for me. Martin left it for Sarah, and for anyone in the family still caught in doubt. It was his final answer, standing in direct opposition to the creed Gregory, Simon, and Patrick clung to. Blood is everything. They had wielded blood as a weapon, as chains. Martin, he saw love as the only bond worth holding onto. He leaned forward slightly, as though his gaze could pierce the screen to meet mine. "Eleanor, if you feel burdened, let it go. Don't let the secrets I kept weigh you down. You've always been stronger than I ever imagined. And Sarah, trust her. She will find her own light." Tears streamed freely, but this time, I wasn't suffocating. Instead, I felt a strange lightness. Somehow, Martin had given me freedom to move forward without carrying the weight of his hidden past. Sarah sat beside me, her hand clutching mine tightly. I turned to see her eyes glistening, red from tears yet glowing with resolve. "Mom," she whispered, "Dad just said what you've always believed." I nodded, unable to speak. We simply sat there, hand in hand, listening to Martin's voice flow back from the past, carrying both pain and healing. Martin sat in silence, staring into the lens for those final seconds, his eyes as if trying to hold onto me one last time. Then the screen went dark, leaving only my reflection streaked with tears. I couldn't contain it. Both hands covered my face as sobs broke free, months of grief pouring out. And yet, strangely, amid the crying, a smile slowly tugged at my lips. I cried for the loss, but I smiled for the love he left behind. My trembling hand reached out, touching the black screen as if it still held his warmth. "Martin," I whispered, my voice breaking, "I heard you, and I will move forward." Sarah's arms wrapped around my shoulders. She said nothing, but her silence was enough. I was no longer alone. The next morning, Cedar Valley awakened under the glow of dawn. Mist lay over the rolling hills, pierced by the first golden rays spilling through the living room window. As I descended the stairs, I stopped short. Sarah was standing on a chair, carefully lifting the new painting I had finished the night before. She hung it in the center of the wall. Sunlight streamed across the canvas, brushing over the still fresh strokes. In the painting stretched a wide meadow, an endless blue sky, and a horizon that reached beyond sight. It was more than art, it was a declaration. The shadows of the past had closed, giving way to light. I stood motionless, my throat tight. Sarah climbed down, her eyes shining. "Mom, this isn't just your painting. This is our beginning." I smiled, lighter than I had felt in years. "Yes, my girl, a new beginning." By noon, we walked into the fields behind the house. The wind swept strong, carrying the scent of fresh grass and the chorus of birds. In the distance, horses ran wild along the hillsides, manes whipping in the golden light. They thundered forward, every stride unbound, no fence holding them back. Sarah and I stood side by side, watching. To me, the horses were more than a familiar sight of the ranch. They were freedom itself, the freedom we had just reclaimed after years shackled by ambition, hollow honor, and lies. I drew a deep breath, letting the wind rush through my hair. The sunlight warmed my face. In that moment, I knew the chains of greed had fallen. What remained was love, justice, and life beginning anew here. The horses charged across the hillside, their hooves pounding like an anthem of freedom. I gripped Sarah's hand and whispered, "We've come home, my daughter. Freedom is ours." And Cedar Valley now was more than land. It was proof that love is stronger than blood. My dear friends, if this story has touched your heart, I invite you to leave a comment and share your thoughts or your own experiences. And don't forget to subscribe so we can continue to listen, to tell, and to live through stories together, stories that may be yours, or perhaps someone you once knew.